June 3, 2007. At 10:12 a.m., the control tower of Humberto Delgado International Airport in Lisbon received a radio signal on an outdated frequency, one that had been almost entirely unused since the late 1960s. Amidst the static and interruptions, a voice came through, clear and unmistakable. "This is Flight VAA 914, requesting emergency landing. We've gone off course. Fuel remaining less than 10 minutes. Confirm coordinates." At first, the air traffic controller assumed it was some sort of prank. There was no registered flight with that number. But when the camera turned toward runway 14B, everyone witnessed something beyond belief. A Douglas DC-7 was approaching for landing. The aircraft was painted in a silvery ivory tone with the red and white logo of Vanguard Air, a model long retired from service nearly half a century ago. The DC-7 landed safely. Its engines sputtered softly before falling silent, leaving behind a thin plume of smoke like something from another era. The ground crew rushing toward the aircraft froze in place. The logo, the flight number, the design, everything matched perfectly to 1957. But this wasn't a replica or a restored aircraft. This was an original plane, complete with faded safety instructions on board and an old advertisement for Chesterfield cigarettes on the back of a seat in row 3. A rapid response team soon arrived. Opening the cockpit door, they found Captain David Halverson, born in 1919, sitting upright, hand on the control yoke, with a bewildered expression on his face. "We just hit turbulence. Why are your uniforms so strange? This is Lisbon Airport, isn't it?" Within the hour, the Portuguese government had completely sealed off the area. Information release was strictly prohibited. Everyone present was ordered to sign non-disclosure agreements. On board were 89 passengers, including children and a nun from the Order of St. Clair. All were alive, conscious, and insisted that the current date was June 2, 1957. Doctors were immediately summoned. None of the passengers showed any signs of aging, not a single new wrinkle or hint of cellular degeneration. DNA tests on the children matched that of 8-year-olds, even though, by their documents, they should have been 58 years old. A review of old flight records and archives revealed that Flight VAA 914 had been declared missing on June 2, 1957, en route from Caracas to Miami. The last signal disappeared as the plane was flying over the Atlantic. No wreckage, no distress call. The case had been classified as an unexplained disappearance and eventually faded from memory. However, during the inspection of the aircraft's fuselage, one analyst made a strange discovery. The metal beneath the paint was as new. No corrosion, no degradation, despite the passage of 50 years. Traces of ionization were found, as though the plane had been sealed in a static vacuum. But the most unsettling discovery came later. Under the co-pilot's seat, a small black metallic box was found, one that none of the crew recognized. On its surface were 3 interwoven circles and an inscription in an unknown language, Asem Nalari. The box had no hinges, seams, or locks. It could not be opened. Attempts to scan it with X-rays failed. Monitors displayed only black emptiness. No reflection, no structure, no heat signature. As if absolute void resided inside. In the midst of all this chaos, one of the passengers, a former astronomer named Henry Mallory, sat quietly, staring at his pocket watch. He handed it to the investigators and pointed at the dial. The hands had stopped at 10:13 a.m. and had remained frozen for all 50 years. Yet somehow the watch continued to quietly tick, though its hands did not move. When asked why no one on board had aged, Mallory simply replied, "I believe we never truly left that day." At this point, questions began to emerge that went far beyond the boundaries of physics. If time had not passed for them, then what was guiding the plane? Who had set its course? And if it wasn't time itself, what had brought them back? The first possible answer lay inside that black box, but no one yet realized that from the moment it appeared on Earth, the entire network of low-frequency waves across the Western Hemisphere had begun oscillating at 19.42 Hertz, exactly matching the first recorded frequency of collective dreaming. That very night, an old audio file was uncovered in the U.S. Army's archive of obsolete radio frequencies, dated 1957. The recording featured Captain Halvorson's voice, but this time included a phrase never previously transmitted: "I'm not sure we're still in Earth's sky." Like a closed paradox, that phrase was replayed exactly 50 years later, at the precise moment Flight Phi AA914 landed in Lisbon. None of the investigators were able to sleep that night. No one could say for certain whether this plane had returned or whether it had ever truly left that layer of time we mistakenly call reality. Building 7, located within the isolated sector of the International Response Forces, was converted into a temporary quarantine center for the passengers of Flight VAA 914. Each room was equipped with infrared cameras, biological monitors, and brainwave sensors. Yet none of the equipment registered anything abnormal, at least by modern standards. All 89 passengers showed no signs of fear, cognitive impairment, or emotional distress. But this complete calm itself unsettled the experts. These were not people who had just emerged from a 50-year temporal void. They behaved as though they had just completed a routine flight lasting only a few hours and had simply arrived at the wrong destination. Dr. Emily Sousa, a linguist and expert in intertemporal communication from the University of Geneva, was invited to conduct personal interviews with the passengers. She first chose a 9-year-old girl named Annabelle Cresson, who still clutched her ragdoll named Daisy, as if untouched by time. Emily asked, "Annabelle, do you remember what happened on the plane?" Annabelle calmly replied without fear, "We were playing house." Then everything became blurry. There were no clouds outside, only circles spinning and spinning. Then someone spoke. "Who spoke?" Emily pressed gently. "Very quietly, not from the speakers. It was like inside my head. They said, 'Don't be afraid. It's just time breathing.'" Emily shivered. This was not a child's phrasing. The same unsettlingly identical descriptions emerged during other interviews: circles of light, indistinct whispers, and the sensation of standing outside of life, yet still existing. Captain Halvorson was held in a separate isolation chamber. He did not seem disoriented, but constantly stared into the corner of the room. When Emily asked him why, he replied, "I feel like someone's watching. Not you, but the one who brought us here." Within 48 hours, Dr. Leora Mencken, a Canadian specialist in psychohistory and archetypes, was brought in. She uncovered a peculiar coincidence between the passengers' accounts and ancient stories from the Dogon tribe in Africa, tales of a boat in the sky, lost in the space between the beats of time, where there was no day or night, only a stream of light named Nalari. The same word was engraved on the black box discovered inside the aircraft. Leora presented a hypothesis that silenced the entire assembly. They didn't travel anywhere. Time itself bent around them, forming a closed temporal bubble where every molecule was frozen as if encased in glass. The real question now was who or what created this temporal pocket. One interview brought particular confusion. A middle-aged man, registered as a civil engineer named Arthur Bell, posed a counter-question to Emily. "Are you certain it's 2007? Emily nodded. "Yes. Why do you ask?" Arthur smiled gently. "Something feels off. My pulse. I hear it. But not from my chest. From outside." Following the interview, when the magnetic field monitors were activated in Arthur's isolation room, The instruments detected steady pulses emanating from his body at a frequency of 19.42 Hz. This matched precisely the frequency recorded around the black box, as well as the synchronized dream phenomenon registered worldwide on the night after the plane's landing. No one knew whether this was mere coincidence or a manifestation of some unseen connection among these events. On the third night, an elderly passenger named Eleanor Redcliffe, officially 72 years old in 2007, but biologically still 22, requested a private conversation with Emily. She spoke little, simply handing Emily a piece of paper folded into quarters, written in faded ink. It contained just one sentence: "We were chosen, not by someone, but by the gaze of time itself." The note was immediately sealed. Yet the next morning, Eleanor vanished from her locked room. The door hadn't opened, the cameras recorded no movement. The bed was still warm, but no biological trace remained. Reviewing the interview recordings, Emily froze on one frame. The moment Eleanor looked directly into the camera, reflected in her pupils was a three-layered spiral, identical to the Asem Nalari symbol on the black box. At that moment, the researchers finally understood. This was not merely an interview between two eras, it was a collision between two layers of reality. Perhaps the passengers of VAA 914 weren't just people. Perhaps they were a question that time itself had posed to our world in the moment it chose to test the very order we thought we understood. From that point on, every conversation with the passengers became a kind of spiritual investigation, where the lines between memory, physics, and consciousness melted like ice between two centuries, two versions of reality, where no one could say with certainty which was real. On Friday afternoon, the sixth day after the incident, the Laboratory for Anomalous Object Research at the European Institute of Technology in Bern received a special wooden crate delivered from Lisbon aboard a military aircraft. The crate measured approximately 40 by 25 by 25 centimeters, but weighed over 180 kilograms. 2 senior staff members were needed with lifting equipment to move it. The surface of the dark wood was covered with chipped paint, beneath which intricate carvings emerged, triple spirals repeating across its surface, along with markings reminiscent of Proto-Elamite script. One single inscription was written in red ink, whose components defied chemical analysis: Asem Nalari. Do not open. Do not attempt to understand. There were no locks, no hinges. The crate was a solid piece of wood, sliced diagonally into 2 perfectly matched halves, sealed so tightly that even a laser beam couldn't penetrate the seam. After nearly 36 hours of unsuccessful attempts to open it, a young physicist, Dr. Ivan Hochberg, proposed an unconventional method, placing the box inside an anti-resonance chamber, an environment eliminating magnetic, sonic, and gravitational fluctuations. Inside this chamber, the unexpected happened. The box's surface began to disintegrate. Tiny wooden particles separated from the air itself, revealing a completely black metallic monolith inside, neither shiny nor matte, but resembling a moving shadow. When a laser was directed at the exposed metal, no reflection registered. No spectrum, no molecules, no heat. It seemed as though absolute zero resided within the matter, a void inside substance itself. That night, something else occurred. After the research team had retired for rest, Dr. Hochberg returned alone. He activated the audio recordings of the frequencies detected in the VAA 914 passengers, particularly the 19.42 Hz signal emanating from Arthur Bell's body. As the sine wave played, the box began to vibrate. Then a small gap opened, soundless, mechanism-less, simply space itself yielding. Inside, there were no objects, only a green glow, neither bright nor fluorescent, but piercing to perception. Cameras recorded nothing, just a blank white field. But in his final voice recording, Hochberg described something else. "I see chains of memories, but not mine. They belong to those who never existed. Children erased from history, a city beneath water, yet not drowned, and a moon, not orbiting Earth, but something unnamed." The recording ended abruptly on a sustained 19.42 Hz tone. All cameras went dark. Hochberg's heart monitor continued transmitting signals, but he was gone. The chamber was immediately sealed, but no one dared touch the box again. Physicists admitted they had no idea what they were dealing with. Not a device, not a structure, possibly not even matter. Polish archaeologist Dr. Krawitz, after studying the engravings, quietly proposed a hypothesis. In certain untranslated Babylonian texts, an object known as Zeknal is referenced, a relic of forgotten memories, something non-human, what remains after a civilization decides to erase itself from space-time. And only then did the neuroscientists revisit a question lost in the flood of events. Why did none of the passengers remember anything between 1957 and 2007? No nightmares, no void, no dreams, only silence, as though time itself had never existed in their minds. A night guard who happened to be near the box fainted for no clear reason. In delirium, he uttered a single phrase, not in his native language. "We never left. We were called back." The next morning, Captain Halverson, until then completely stable, requested a private meeting with the research team. He made no demands, offered no explanations. When asked what he wanted, he simply said, "I want to return to where I came from." Strangely, he already knew about the existence of the box, even though he had never seen it. The nature of the investigation began to shift. Did VAA 914 accidentally arrive in our time? Or was it sent back because the box needed to be opened? Was the metallic monolith the source of the phenomena? Or was it a doorway, a relic, or perhaps a fracture in reality itself? When the box was resealed, all 19.42 Hz signals vanished. But deep underground, in secured laboratories, one silent question continued to echo. If something is watching us from the other side of time, are we even capable of understanding it? Or is it the very act of understanding that erases us? On the morning of the 11th day following the VAA 914 landing, the 19.42 Hz frequency suddenly reappeared, not only in monitoring equipment but also as a direct resonance in the minds of several researchers. Dr. Emily Sousa was the first to perceive it. She described it as a melody without sound, resonating from within her skull, accompanied by a vague image of a spinning doorway made of light, floating in mid-air without hinges or frame, just two planes of light intersecting like a slice in the fabric of the universe. At the same moment, Arthur Bell, the engineer who claimed to hear his heart from outside, collapsed in his isolation chamber. But the data from his biomonitors registered something unexplainable. He wasn't dead, nor asleep, nor conscious. He had entered a state the specialists called static consciousness. His brain activity wasn't flat like a brain-dead patient, but neither did it oscillate at any known frequency. The research team decided to conduct another experiment with the black metallic box, this time under static conditions and in close proximity to Arthur's body. The result stunned everyone. The slit on the box reopened. But now, the light inside was no longer green, but white-gray, dense, like compressed fog. As the camera approached the box, the screen no longer remained black. A sequence of disjointed images appeared, as fragments of different timelines. A flooded district of Paris, a space station floating amid yellow clouds, a laughing girl but faceless, a hovering spire, a shattered pocket watch with hands spinning backward, all suspended in space, without gravity without sound, without coordinates. Physicist Niels Hauer, a proponent of the parallel concurrent reality theory, proposed a new hypothesis. The box was not an object, but a node of convergence, a place where temporal branches briefly intersected. It led neither to the past nor the future, but connected alternate versions of reality, branches that had been forgotten or had never come to pass. Thus, a new term emerged, temporal overlap zone, TOZ, a place where fragments of realities collide, merge, and disappear. But the most disturbing revelation came later. At a classified meeting with the International Temporal Science Council, declassified materials from DARPA and Roscosmos were presented. Since as early as 1980, both organizations had been recording temporal anomalies, places where mechanical clocks sped up, compass needles spun without cause. People described encounters with alternate versions of themselves. All these phenomena occurred near the frequency of 19.42 Hz and were always accompanied by the same symbol, 3 interlocking rings, identical to those on the black box. At that moment, Captain Halvorsen, silent until now, asked to step outside at precisely 10:13 a.m., the exact time when VAA 914 had vanished back in 1957. He calmly said, "I don't remember where we went, but I feel it's time to return, not for myself, but for what remains on the other side of that doorway." Outfitted with a full sensory monitoring suit, Halvorsen entered the experimental chamber, where the box sat inside its magnetic isolator. He didn't touch the box, but it fully opened, transforming into an elliptical portal of white ashen light. And then came the most astonishing moment. Inside the portal, the observers saw themselves, as if through a distorted mirror, where everything was stretched, deformed, yet eerily accurate. One anthropologist burst into tears, voicing what others dared not say aloud. "We're not looking at it. It's looking at us, and waiting for us to remember who we are." No one forced Halvorsen to enter, but he did, slowly, calmly. As he crossed the threshold of light, the instruments captured a signal. 19.42, 19.42, and then silence. The portal closed. Halvorsen disappeared. The light vanished. The box vanished. In the chamber remained only an antique pocket watch, its hands frozen at 10:13 a.m., this time without a single tick. 3 days later, global background wave monitoring networks registered a strange event. The 19.42 Hz frequency simultaneously appeared at 7 different locations around the world, from Mount Ant to the floor of the Mariana Trench, including the Sahara Desert. All the spikes occurred at the exact same moment, 10:13 a.m. Lisbon time. Scientists couldn't explain it, but Emily Souza, watching the footage of the closing portal, whispered just one sentence. "Perhaps we have just been taught to see time as a living being, and it has just blinked." On June 11, 2007, the Portuguese government held a closed meeting with representatives of the International Temporal Council, a secret organization created in response to the VAA 914 incident. After Captain Halvorsen disappeared behind the light portal, all attempts to recover the black metallic box failed. The 19.42 Hz frequency no longer manifested. The shared dreams ceased. Nothing remained for further experiments. But what was left proved far more significant than any science. The consciousness of the surviving passengers began to change. Arthur Bell, the engineer who had claimed to hear his heart from the outside, awoke from his state of frozen consciousness and spoke in a deeper, slower voice, as though translating from a language not belonging to humanity. "It wasn't us who came here. It was you who caught up to us." These words marked a point of no return. The remaining 88 passengers began to exhibit strange symptoms. They started recalling events they had never experienced, not lost memories, but memory frameworks that were never supposed to happen. One described living another 30 years in a city that exists on no map, where people communicated without words. Another spoke of falling into a river where the water was made of untold stories. Their drawings, descriptions, and words pointed to the same conclusion. They had existed in a place lying between concepts where there is no linear time, no fixed space, and no death. But there was one rule that all of them remembered. Who chooses to leave cannot remain. Who stays must not ask why. For the first time in history, humanity faced a choice of such scale. Should the passengers be allowed to return to 1957 if the portal could be opened again? After many tense meetings, a special agreement was reached to build a new facility, officially designated as the Future Research Station. But in reality, it would serve as the place where each passenger would make their final decision. 88 people, 88 choices. A transparent glass corridor was built, leading to a dome-shaped room illuminated by soft white light. Inside, there was nothing. But scientists believed that, under the right conditions, the final convergence could occur there. One by one, over an 8-hour morning, each passenger was invited inside. No one was forced, no one persuaded. Only one question was asked. Do you wish to stay in 2007 or return to 1957? To a world that no longer has a place for you? Then came the most unexpected outcome. Almost half chose to return. Almost half chose to stay, and 3 made no choice at all. They silently walked through the room and vanished, even though the portal had not opened. One of them was Annabelle, the 9-year-old girl who had earlier described the circles of light and the voice in her head. Before disappearing, she said to Emily Sousa a sentence that would remain etched in Emily's memory forever. If I stay, everyone will be sad. If I return, everything will feel wrong. So I will go where no choice is needed. From that day forward, the domed room ceased to function. The portal never opened again. Even though all the physical conditions were precisely replicated, the pale, ashen glow never returned. The black box that had vanished with Halvorsen left no trace, not even on any quantum measurement. The government quietly issued an official statement. The VAA 914 event has been classified as indeterminate. No evidence confirms or refutes any known physical phenomena. All materials have been sealed. But far more important than the classified documents was the legacy that remained. Emily Sousa, who had witnessed everything, recorded a final entry in her personal journal. It was never officially published, but was whispered about among the scientists of the Temporal Council. There are doors, not meant to be opened, but to remind us that once we stood before them. There are choices not made to decide, but to realize that the very possibility of choice is already forgiveness from the universe. And there are realities that do not wait for us to enter, they exist solely to teach us. Time is not a jailer, it is an outstretched hand. It waits every second, and all it takes is the courage to turn and face it. 10 years later, at an abandoned weather station in Greenland, an old pocket chronometer was found. Its hands were frozen at 10:13. On the inside cover, an inscription had been engraved. To the one who remained. I never returned because I never left. Dothot. No one was able to explain this by any known law of physics. No one was able to locate the portal again. But somewhere, at the boundary between sleep and reality, the question remains open, and time has yet to give its answer.